State facility with a runway on it in the middle of the Everglades. Yes, it's surrounded by alligators. And they're using this facility to house illegal immigrants that are captured at our border. And they are then going to be transferred over to this large facility in the jungle where they will be processed and removed by that airport. They will be flown back to their country of origin. It's a one-stop shop, and it is exactly what the president has been calling for since 2016. We are streamlining in a very humane way as well, contrary to what the corporate press is saying. We are streamlining and making efficient the president and the American people's desire to remove as many undocumented persons as possible from this country. Now, of course, the media doesn't like it. The media wants to scream about how unfair it is. They want to talk to you about the inhumanity. They're making it sound like, forgive me, they're making it sound like Auschwitz. It is not. This is a processing center. It is well protected by Florida National Guard, and they are working overtime to diligently remove the people we capture in this country, some of whom, by the way, are violent, many of them, violent criminals, cartel members, in some cases Islamic extremists, in some cases military-age Chinese males who have miraculously come into our country by the thousands. This is exactly what the president has promised. This is another promise made, promise kept example. And it's a very important turn of events politically. You see, for the last several years, Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis have not been on the same page ever since Governor DeSantis, who is without a doubt the best governor in all 50 states. He has been on the wrong side of President Trump ever since running against him in the 2024 presidential primary. Today, though, during the unveiling when President Trump arrived, he had very, very nice things to say about Governor Ron DeSantis. And Governor DeSantis himself had very positive things to say about President Trump. It should be noted also that Governor DeSantis did not need to open this facility up to federal immigration authorities. In fact, he was advised in many instances not to because of the controversy that would be had because of it. But Governor DeSantis has taken political courage to the next level. He has realigned himself with President Trump, and the two men are now again operating simpatico on this most important issue. We have a clip of Governor DeSantis talking about what really Alligator Alcatraz is. Despite its name, it is not this concentration camp. It is a federal immigration processing center. So, Greg, if you could roll that tape of Governor DeSantis, please.
What it can be, I think, is an effective way to increase the number of removals and deportations, which ultimately, if you don't do that, you're going to continue to have this problem of illegal immigration. So you'll be able to bring people in, they'll get processed. If they have an order of removal, then they can be queued, and the federal government can fly right on the runway, right there. You literally drive them 2,000 feet, put them on a plane, and then they're gone. It's very logistically simple. But what we're also going to do is, this idea of immigration judge, these are not Article 3 judges. They're not federal judges like we think of. These are executive branch employees who are called immigration judges. So you can have you can deputize different employees to do that. So we've offered some of our National Guardsmen to be able to serve as immigration judges.
And that's a key thing here. Governor DeSantis is a unique leader in that he does have not only legal background professionally, but he clearly understands the actual law, which is one of the reasons why he has been such an effective governor in the state of Florida and why he is such a good partner for President Trump. Very few other governors, even Republican governors, have had the gumption to stand with President Trump on what has been, because of the media backlash, a very unpopular move. It actually, though, looks like it's going to work very well. This is a very safe facility. The people will be processed. And for all those people out there saying this is inhumane, I would just remind everybody, I personally live about half an hour away from this facility. I know exactly where it is. There are people around the world right now who save their life savings up to go move to a place, a geography and a climate like this in Florida. This is not some concentration camp, as they're describing it. This is precisely what is needed to protect the United States. So good on President Trump, good on Governor DeSantis. This is another great example of promises made, promises kept. And I would remind everybody, as Stephen Miller recently said in the press conference earlier today on this issue, the president inherited the single worst immigration crisis this country or any country in the world had ever seen. And what did he do? In 6 months, he got it completely reversed. And if the courts weren't fighting him the way they were, he probably would have even been able to do more. But he continues to prosecute this policy, his solemn promise to the American people. He continues to prosecute it with great success. And for that, every American should be proud. Now, there have been other things going on the way to the alligator Alcatraz. The president was leaving the White House, and he did one of his typical walk and talk impromptu press conferences. He was asked about what's going on with the big, beautiful bill. The deadline is rapidly approaching. The president, of course, has had a spat with a handful of several prominent Republican senators and congressmen, one of them being, if you can put up clip four, please, Greg, one of them being Thomas Massie, who is a darling, rightly so, in my opinion, a darling on the right. Very many years he's been very pro conservative policies. He's been one of the few advocates for balancing our budget and getting the spending under control, which, as we all know, America's spending is its single greatest national and economic security threat. Because he opposes the spending in Trump's big, beautiful bill, and he's one of the only Republicans who dares to say anything negative about the BBB, Trump is now ordering his former campaign advisor, Chris LaCivita, to open up a political action committee specifically aimed at primarying Congressman Massie. Well, into the fray now, the world's wealthiest man, the iconic Elon Musk, has waited, and he has come down on the side of Thomas Massie. Elon Musk has confirmed that he will be spending whatever amount of money he can to prevent Trump from removing Massie or primarying Massie successfully, because Musk is steadfastly dedicated to the idea that Trump that the government must get its spending in order. So here we have now, ladies and gentlemen, what I have long said was one of the few mistakes President Trump made, which was alienating the world's wealthiest man. Regardless of what we think about Elon Musk and the transhumanism thing, or whether you like electric vehicles or not, the fact of the matter is, to paraphrase Lyndon Johnson about another issue, Elon Musk, being the wealthiest man in the world, you want him in your tent urinating out. You don't want him outside your tent urinating in. And now, of course, we have evidence. Musk has said that if the BBB is passed, and I believe it will be, if it's passed into law by the deadline of July 4th, it looks like Elon Musk will form a third party. He's calling it the American Party. And while he might not be able to win any real substantive election with that party, we saw with Ross Perot in 1992 when George H.W. Bush was going up against a young Bill Clinton. The Ross Perot third party split the vote from the Republicans, harmed the ability for the Republicans to win re-election, and that could eventually be what's happening here if Musk follows through with his plan. So this was an unforced error. We know that Trump had a falling out with Musk over several issues last month. It's unfortunate this has happened. I'd like also, before we go, I'd like to play out clip number 5, which is Trump commenting on his way to the Marine One helicopter this morning. He was asked if Elon Musk should be deported, and here's what he said to show you how nasty things are getting between him and Musk again.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. I don't want an electric car. I want to have maybe gasoline, maybe electric, maybe a hybrid, maybe someday a hydrogen. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem. It blows up, So I'm going to give that one to Peter. I'm going to let Peter test it out.
And what he's talking about there, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that Tesla, the electric vehicle company that is iconic, that is Elon Musk's darling, it relies heavily on subsidies from the United States taxpayer to survive, or it has. Elon Musk in the past, though, has said he no longer needs those subsidies, but obviously he still wants them. And something that has been floated is the concept that Elon Musk, who is very incensed with President Trump, and this is very unfortunate again that this is happening, he is threatening to basically no longer do business with using SpaceX with NASA. In fact, President Trump has threatened similarly that he wants to start looking at other vendors rather than relying solely on SpaceX to get Americans in and back from orbit. And I would just remind the president and everybody that without SpaceX, we would still be relying on the Russians to get us into orbit. There is no system comparable to SpaceX's reusable launch system that is anywhere near as prepared to handle the kind of workload that is required. And I would also remind everyone that the President Trump in his first term was America's first space president, probably since JFK. And we cannot lose the new space race with China. And in fact, Elon Musk is keeping us in the space race with China with his reusable rockets. So I hope, and we should all hope, that this spat between Trump and Musk can be ameliorated and we can bring Musk back into the fold the way that Trump brought Governor DeSantis back into the fold over Alligator Alcatraz. We need to be building bridges, not tearing each other apart, because the left is coming for us all, my friends. And that is the absolute truth. Up next, we've got Gabby Cuccia coming in talking about the Autopen president. Not fun with Joe Biden, not a good guy, not good things going on. We'll be right back. Stick with Lindell TV.
Swollen limbs, joint pain, inflammation, skin aging, and cognitive decline. These are just a few of the awful side effects that you can experience due to poor blood circulation. And popping ibuprofen is not a solution to the pain. It's only temporary relief, and it's only masking the true problem, which is inflammation. Researchers are saying to add this Antarctic super nutrient to your diet. I'm talking about omega-3 fatty acids, but not just any form of omegas. These particular omega-3 fatty acids are sourced from wild-caught krill. Has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, as well as reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. For a limited time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic Krill Oil for up to 66% off plus free shipping. Just go to getkrill.com/Lindell right now to get your special offer.
And we are back at Emerald Robinson's Absolute Truth. I'm filling in for Emerald, Brandon Weichert, your guest host. We are now joined by our friend Gabrielle Cuccia. She is a former White House staffer. She was a Pentagon correspondent as well. So this is an individual who knows Washington, D.C. very well. She was the original story. She broke the original story, rather, on the Autopen scandal of the Biden regime. And so, Gabby, I know that you've been on before talking about it. You have some new information. Why don't you fill us in on what's going on with the Autopen and Joe Biden's totally fake presidency, please?
Thanks, Brendan, for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, just to give people context before we dive into it, I worked at the White House. I worked under the Obama administration in a political position and then also in a political position under the Trump administration. And I say all that to say, while I was working there at the White House, I actually had Autopen privileges. So this is first primary source. Like I'm telling you all of this. And instead of everyone having to kind of wait for GOP oversight to get a grip and call these people on in. So I'd be remiss not to mention that in the first half of the show, Brandon, you were talking about Lyndon B. Johnson. And it's funny because somehow he also is involved in the Autopen story, because in 1968, the National Enquirer actually focus on Lyndon B. Johnson utilizing the Autopen, it appeared far more than any other president before his time. So much so that on the very front line, the quote of the title was "The robot that sits in for the president," a picture of the Autopen for the first time that you'd seen in the Oval Office, being under Lyndon B. Johnson, which is wild. But the craziest part now, really, and of course, a lot of people assume, especially conservatives, that of course it was Joe Biden that wasn't necessarily signing what it appears to be his signature. This was the use of the Autopen. I can tell you again, the office I worked in, there's two offices that are maintained at the White House to facilitate the Autopen procedures. One of them is the executive clerk. They're the ones that handle the physical document. And then the Office of Records Management, which handles the physical Autopen machine. Both of those stay within each administration. It is an apolitical position. And so I say that because with all of the Rolodex of collecting original documentation and being the arbitrators really of the whole process, I mean, there's only been 10 executive clerks in US history. The 10th one still sitting there happened to be my boss. He's been there for about 13 years now. Those are the folks that know who's where the inner workings are. And I can tell you that President Biden, by far, out of any other president, utilized the Autopen in the most in US history. Of course, Lyndon B. Johnson being number two. I can also say that conservatives do tend, or Republican presidents do tend to exercise, the full entourage of the press, having the points of contact that helped facilitate, say, an executive order, a nomination, whatever it may be, signing those in the Oval Office far more than Democrat presidents. But what's interesting is that right now we have GOP oversight trying to conduct these investigations. We heard from the latest being Neera Tanden, who was the second staff secretary over at the White House during the Biden administration, testify in which she says that she was not told explicitly verbally by Joe Biden that it was okay for her to facilitate Autopen processes, but that someone in the inner circle did. Now, regardless of, I'm sure that's quite likely considering that there was a lot of questions of, how many times that he was in Delaware versus him being physically present over at the White House. But when it comes down to it, I named those two offices, right? The ones that manage the documentation, the other one that manages the Autopen. The third and most important, I don't know why balloons are going up right now. This is not a celebration by any means. Maybe it is. I don't know. But the biggest issue here is that third entity is the staff secretary, right? So Neera Tanden being that second staff secretary, they're the ones that ignite that whole process from start to finish. They have a full thread of email that starts with the drafting process for the executive clerks to piece all of the documentation together to make sure it falls in line with protocol of standard necessary elements, whether it needs to be pulled in for the Office of General Counsel, say the National Security Council, Department of Energy, whatever it may be. And then finally, Office of Records Management gets integrated in only when, say Neera Tanden in this case, puts in writing, after all of this has been cataloged in writing from start to finish processing, ready for AP. Once the staff secretary says ready for AP, ready for Autopen, it's up to the executive clerks to print out on nice bond paper exactly what the president's signature needs to be signed on and transports that upstairs. This is all happening in the Eisenhower building, not in the West Wing. And it's brought up to the top floor in which you have to sign. So the executive clerk has to sign their name. They're the only ones that transport documentation, when it's executive orders, nominations, memos, whatever it may be. And that's when the records management official has you sign in, turns on the key to turn on the Autopen, and carries out that signature. Right after that, it's given right back. The executive clerk is standing right there. It's given to the executive clerk, of which I was one, bring it on down to the West Wing and hand deliver to the staff secretary, of which then again in another email, it's verbalized, but also an email, because again, all this stuff is required to be cataloged, is ready for press release. And that's when, say, your KGJP or any sort of press secretary and the White House press pool would know what is being signed. So a lot of focus on Neera Tanden, but I would say, although she confirmed the process of which I'm explaining here, The bigger issue to me, and I think where GOP oversight needs to make sure that they're getting their ducks in a row, is that Neera Tanden was there from October 2021 to the end of May of 2023. Stephanie Feldman was there from May 2023 till the end of President Joe Biden's presidency. So
Yeah.
she's the one that needs to answer the questions and needs to be called on in. And a lot of focus is on these executive orders and also on those pardons.
Yep.
But let's not forget about these presidential nominations that require the president's signature. If GOP oversight wants to get serious, they're going to bring Stephanie Feldman in, because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate last legal hand in executing the Autopen. Another
Yeah.
element of GOP oversight was that there was this whistleblower report that, wait a minute, throughout this oversight investigation, and I'm not diminishing the work that GOP oversight has done, but I want to make sure, and I think taxpayers would want to make sure if they're exercising the investigation that they're remaining clear on the facts and what they need to look at. So we already know that all of this is Rolodexed in an email on government servers on the Microsoft Outlook accounts, of which two offices that stay within each administration have access to at a bare minimum. Again, I have no idea why these balloons are going. This is a new one for me. But maybe the celebration in all of this is the fact that the
The truth is
information
getting out.
is all right there. Yeah, the truth is
Yeah.
getting out. But bring in Stephanie Feldman, and if there's no documentation, even though the standard operating procedures require all this to be cataloged on an email chain with all their Office of Records Management, executive clerks, staff secretary, and Office of General Counsel. If none of that is there and cataloged, bring in the Office of General Counsel, because that's guilt by not admission but omission,
Yeah.
right? Because all that information has to be on there. But again, I digress into the other point I was trying to make, is that one of the developments was GOP oversight saying, oh, well, wait a second, we just found a third signature that doesn't match some of the one of the matches signatures from the rest of the administration, and that signature that they were referring to a couple weeks ago, I think is important. Is let's not get our panties in a twist and focus on some of these smaller details. Those signatures that GOP oversight was focused on that were different happened to be from the very first stack of signed executive orders by President Biden that very first week in office, of which he only got worse over time. I'm not saying he was healthy throughout any of these 4 years, but he was maybe less sick the first week of his presidency versus the last week of his presidency. He physically signed those, and those were aired on the press pool footage. So I just say all that to say there's a lot of extra little details here, and I'd rather us focus to what we know. And
Yeah.
what we know is that Neera Tanden and Stephanie Feldman executed the Autopen.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, and I think people need to understand. For years, when I was a senior editor over at 1945.com, I was ripping the Comer committee because, in my opinion, having worked on the Hill for many years, I don't think they were very serious about going after Biden. I think they're all part of a club, and we ain't in it, as George Carlin said, and they didn't really want to press too hard when Biden was in power. And it seems to me like maybe there's this kind of half-hearted attempt to get Biden now. Frankly, it's too little too late. But I do think you're onto something with the Autopen, and I want to make it clear here. President can use the Autopen, but it's the way it was used. It was the extent to which it was used, and I think also it needs to be clear. We talk about Stephanie Feldman, we talk about Neera Tanden, but they were reporting to people, were telling them to do this, and I have heard, and I might have been from you, but other people as well. Susan Rice, who was very much a domestic policy advisor, was involved with this. And we know Susan Rice to be, shall we say, a nefarious actor, very ideological. I know her, of course, from her days in National Security Council. But the point here is that, I have long said that Biden is our Chernenko, right? He was the kind of brain dead guy surrounded by all these apparatus chicks who were kind of pushing him around. Do you have any idea if there was one advisor in particular that was having them utilize this Autopen, or is it sort of just, kind of everything everybody was doing? I mean, is there one name that we can really fixate on and that Comer should be looking at beyond those two?
You hit the Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Brandon, because Susan Rice, two of the three staff secretaries came from Susan Rice's domestic policy. Even remember Stephanie Feldman. I mean, she was a part of Obama's term in which she was working with the vice president at the time, Joe Biden,
Remember Stephanie?
of which
Yeah,
she was under Susan Rice. So
yeah,
yes, I think that's a very clear indicator. You mean at some point you can't open the floodgates to everybody because there's going to be natural leakers. You know how
right.
Washington is. No one can keep a darn
Yep.
secret if it, for it to save their lives. So no, this was a very controlled situation. So much so that even on Emerald's show, before Joe Biden announced him announcing that he
Right.
wasn't running for president, you guys were nice enough to have me on for me to let you guys know I had a whistleblower from the White House
Yep.
that's
I
there,
remember. Yep.
and still there. And he was told by Jill Biden herself that they were not wanting to call quits on the campaign, and that was being
Right.
done by the circle that's around her. So
Well,
everyone's kind of
yeah,
talking about the
yeah.
top lady being involved, and yeah, I think that's totally compliant with the
Well,
sources that I've heard
we
during that
know,
administration.
yeah, there were factions. And in fact, I know Josh Rogan a
Yeah,
little bit from the Washington Post, and he and I talked when Biden was first elected, and I talked a long time with him, and he was telling me about the 3 or 4 factions he was tracking from his reporting at the
yeah,
Washington Post. You had the John Kerry wing, Susan Rice wing, then you had the Jill Biden wing, excuse me, Dr. Jill Biden, and then you had Kamala Harris's wing, and there were all these factions because the center was so weak. Joe Biden was so weak, obviously. So
yeah,
this really is, again, you can use the Autopen. I worked for Bosses on the Hill. We
yeah.
had Autopens on the Hill as well, but that's not the
And the
issue. The
Pentagon has it
That's
as
right.
well. So
That's right. The issue
mhm.
is the extent of the use and what it was used for. And I think that, I mean, how likely do you think the Comer investigation is going to get to the bottom of this in any meaningful? I mean, do you agree with me? This is just sort of for show, or is this like a serious thing they're going to
Yeah,
really dive into?
I just because the evidence is so obvious and you still have personnel that are very much tied to this process and can answer all of these questions under oath, could answer all of these questions outside of even the politicals. To me, for those reasons, I try to still remain hopeful, but I do have a sense that, well, it shouldn't have taken this long. I agree with
Right.
you. It's too little, too late. How do you roll back all of this? Now you set a nasty precedent of which
Mhm.
we've done the due diligence. You have it all tracked, you have a protocol, you have SOPs in place to utilize the AutoPen freely and fairly
Mhm.
under an administration. So what more do you do now? I think that they waited a little too long. Now we're getting in the weeds of this just kind of being some grandstanding. I can't understand why Neera, sure, of course, has to be there. I've called that before. I need Stephanie Feldman to come to the plate and maybe my tune would change. So I
Yeah.
hope I'm wrong. I'd rather be wrong in this case,
Yeah.
Brandon.
Well, that seems to be a refrain of mine on other issues. I'm happy to be proven wrong. Have yet to be proven wrong on many of these things. I think you're probably going to have yet to be proven wrong on this one too. The AutoPen story is another one of those stories that we've covered today that doesn't get enough traction. It
Yeah.
is, in my opinion, and I don't know, maybe you feel the same way. This is a real constitutional crisis. And is that where
Yeah.
you're landing on this? Yeah,
Abs-
yeah. This is, yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. Americans should have the right to know. It's not a crime to utilize the auto pen. Under certain circumstances, it just might be, considering Joe Biden.
Yes,
But I think Americans have the right to know. They have the right to know if the president's there and they're rolling out an executive order or a nomination or whatever it may be. The doors should be open. They should have it signed, and that takes about 5 seconds to do. Doing this from afar is, I understand, when there's a presidential trip or some business that needs to be had. Of course, that's what we voted for. But we have the right to know how that's being
that's right.
done, how the stamps are being pushed. Absolutely. Why not?
That's right. And
So,
I would just close by saying that, the President Trump, I think, has a lot of legal maneuvering room when some of these Biden
yeah.
appointees try to come at him. Maybe, just maybe, he can bring out the auto pen thing, and hopefully
Yeah.
that will be what we do. Gabby, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and keep doing this. I think we're going to see you tomorrow, maybe too, at the 2:30 hour.
Yeah.
So we will continue this conversation. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for logging in and checking out Lindell TV, Absolute Truth with Emerald Robinson. Stay here. We got plenty of great content coming your way today. I'm Brandon Weichert, filling in for Emerald Robinson.